Cole Sheridan's hands froze mid-air, the coffee mug suspended between the counter and his lips. He had meant it as a joke, just words tossed across the kitchen while watching Reese help his daughter with homework, the same way she had done for 2 years now. You know what, Reese? You should just marry me at this point. The kind of thing a tired single dad says without thinking. But Reese looked up. Her pencil stopped moving. Her eyes, usually so guarded, glistened with something he had never seen before. I thought you'd never ask. 5 words. No laughter. No smile to signal she was playing along. Cole's heart slammed against his ribs. His 7-year-old daughter Piper glanced between them, confused. He had spent 2 years convincing himself she was just a friend, just a neighbor, just someone helping out. Now those 5 words threatened to unravel everything he thought he knew about the woman living next door, and about himself. What Cole didn't realize yet was that Reese Calloway had been waiting for that joke since the day she moved in, and the secret she carried would change everything. 2 years earlier, the moving truck had pulled up next door on a Tuesday morning in late September. Cole remembered because Piper had been home sick with a fever, and he had been sitting on the porch with her wrapped in a blanket, watching the maple leaves drift down like scattered pennies. The woman who stepped out of the silver sedan behind the truck wore sunglasses too large for her face and moved with the kind of deliberate stillness that suggested she was used to being watched. She directed the movers with small gestures, never raising her voice, and when one of them dropped a box marked "Fragile," she simply looked at him until he picked it up with trembling hands. Cole had thought she was beautiful in the way a closed door is beautiful, polished, impenetrable, clearly hiding something worth protecting. Piper, even with her fever-flushed cheeks and runny nose, had squirmed out of the blanket and tottered down the porch steps before Cole could stop her. He watched his 5-year-old daughter march across the yard, her pink dinosaur pajamas dragging in the grass, and plant herself directly in the woman's path. "Hi," Piper said, with the absolute confidence of someone who had never been rejected. "I'm Piper. I live there. Are you going to be my neighbor? Do you have any pets? I wanted a dog, but Daddy says we can't have one because he's allergic. That means he sneezes a lot. Do you sneeze a lot?" The woman had stood there, frozen, as if a small creature from another planet had suddenly begun communicating with her. Cole was already halfway across the yard, apologies forming on his lips, when something unexpected happened. The woman crouched down, removed her sunglasses, and looked at Piper with eyes the color of winter rain. "I'm Reese," she said, and her voice was softer than Cole had expected, with a slight rasp like she hadn't used it much lately. "I don't have any pets. I don't sneeze a lot, and I think your dinosaur pajamas are the best thing I've seen all week." Piper beamed like she had just been handed the keys to a candy store. "Daddy made pancakes this morning, but I couldn't eat them because my tummy hurts. Do you like pancakes?" Cole reached them then, scooping Piper up with one arm and extending the other hand toward Reese. "I'm so sorry. She's sick and should be resting. She's perfect," Reese said, and something in her expression shifted, a crack in the polished surface. She shook his hand briefly, her grip firm but her fingers cold. "I'm Reese Calloway. I'll try to be a quiet neighbor." She walked away before he could respond, disappearing into the house that had sat empty for 6 months, and Cole stood there holding his daughter and wondering why a woman who could afford movers and a car that cost more than his annual salary would choose to live in a 3-bedroom house in a town where the biggest excitement was the annual pie-eating contest at the county fair. The first few months, Reese kept to herself. Cole would see her leaving early in the mornings and returning after dark, always alone, always with that careful stillness. She never had visitors. Her curtains stayed drawn. The only sign of life was the soft glow of a computer screen visible through her office window late at night, and sometimes, when the wind was right, the faint sound of classical music drifting across the yard. Cole told himself it wasn't his business. He had enough on his plate running his carpentry business, raising Piper alone, trying to keep the house from falling apart around them. He didn't have time to wonder about the mysterious neighbor who looked at his daughter like she was something precious and terrifying. But Piper had other ideas. His daughter had inherited his late wife's stubborn streak and her grandmother's complete inability to let anyone be unhappy in her presence. She started leaving things on Reese's doorstep, drawings of houses and flowers and stick figures holding hands, dandelions picked from the yard, once a rock that she had painted to look like a ladybug. Cole would watch from the kitchen window, half embarrassed and half proud, as Piper deposited her offerings and ran back home. He never saw Reese collect them, but they always disappeared by the next morning. And then, about 3 months after Reese moved in, Piper got sick again. Really sick. This time a stomach bug that kept her home from school for a week and left Cole juggling client calls and laundry and a daughter who couldn't keep anything down. On the 4th day, there was a knock at the door. Reese stood on the porch holding a pot of soup and looking deeply uncomfortable. "I made too much," she said, thrusting the pot toward him. "And I noticed you haven't left the house in 3 days, so I assumed anyway it's chicken noodle. Homemade. The noodles might be a little thick. I'm not much of a cook, but it should be gentle on her stomach." She turned to leave before he could even thank her, but Piper's voice floated from the living room. "Is that Miss Reese? Can she come in? Please, Daddy. Please?" Cole saw the moment Reese's resolve crumbled. Her shoulders dropped, her jaw unclenched, and she turned back with an expression that was equal parts terror and longing. "Just for a minute," she said, and followed him inside. That minute turned into an hour. The hour turned into Reese reading 3 books to Piper while Cole heated up the soup, which was, despite her disclaimer, absolutely delicious. It turned into Reese showing Piper a card trick that made her laugh for the first time in days. It turned into Cole walking Reese to the door as the sun set and saying, without quite meaning to, "She's been asking about you. The drawings, the flowers she's been hoping you'd come over." Reese's hand was on the doorknob, her back to him, and for a long moment, she didn't move. "I'm not good with people," she finally said. I've never been good at this. The neighborly thing, the friend thing. I work too much and I forget to eat, and I can go days without speaking to anyone and it doesn't bother me. I'm not—" She stopped, her voice catching on something she couldn't name. "You're not what?" Cole asked gently. Reese turned, and in the fading light, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I'm not someone who gets to have this," she said. "This Norman Rockwell life with the kid and the dad and the soup and the—" She gestured vaguely at everything around them. "I had something else, a different life, and I walked away from it because it was killing me, but I don't know how to do this instead. I don't know how to be a person who has neighbors and makes soup and watches kids do card tricks." Cole should have let her go. He should have nodded and wished her a good night and returned to his sick daughter and his messy kitchen and his familiar loneliness. Instead, he said, "You don't have to know how. You just have to keep showing up." Reese stared at him for a long moment, something unreadable moving behind her eyes. Then she nodded once, opened the door, and walked back across the yard to her dark, empty house. But the next morning, when Cole looked out the window, she was sitting on her porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sun rise. And when Piper woke up and stumbled to the window, Reese waved. After that, things changed slowly. Then all at once, Reese started joining them for dinner once a week, always with an excuse, always with an offering, as if she needed to justify her presence with a bottle of wine or a dessert from the bakery downtown. She helped Piper with her homework when Cole was stuck on a job that ran late. She learned how to braid hair from YouTube tutorials, and Piper started requesting Miss Reese braids instead of the lopsided ponytails Cole had been managing. She fixed the dripping faucet in the bathroom without being asked, and when Cole tried to pay her, she looked at him like he had suggested she moonwalk across the kitchen. "I grew up taking things apart," she said. "My father thought everyone should know how to fix what they break." There was something in the way she said father that made Cole not ask any follow-up questions. He was learning that Reese had walls, and that pushing against them only made her retreat. So he didn't push. He let her come closer at her own pace, and she did inch by inch, dinner by dinner, bedtime story by bedtime story. He learned that she took her coffee black and her wine red, that she read philosophy books for fun and couldn't cook anything that didn't come with instructions, that she had a laugh like sunlight through a window, rare and startling and absolutely worth waiting for, that she hummed while she worked, old songs he vaguely remembered from his grandmother's kitchen, that she was fiercely private and unexpectedly kind and hiding something so big that it sometimes made her hands shake when she thought no one was watching. Cole fell in love with her slowly, the way you fall asleep not all at once, but in pieces, and then completely. But he never said anything, couldn't say anything, because Reese had made it clear, in 100 small ways, that she was only passing through their lives. She had her work, whatever mysterious work kept her typing late into the night. She had her phone calls that made her close doors and speak in a voice he couldn't hear. She had her separate life, the one that existed before she moved next door. And Cole knew he knew, with the certainty of a man who had already lost one person he loved, that she would eventually return to it. So he told himself that friendship was enough, that watching her help Piper with math problems was enough, that the way she smiled at him over Sunday breakfast was enough, that having her close but not his was better than not having her at all. He almost believed it, most days. But sometimes, late at night, after Piper was asleep and the house was quiet, Cole would look out his window at the light in Reese's office and wonder what it would feel like to stop pretending. He never found out until the day everything fell apart. It was Piper's 7th birthday party, a small affair in their backyard with a handful of kids from school and a cake that Cole had attempted to decorate himself. Reese had helped him blow up balloons that morning, and she was wearing a sundress that made Cole's chest hurt every time he looked at her. The party was winding down, the kids sugar-crashed on the grass, when a black car pulled up to the curb. Cole noticed Reese's posture change before he saw her face. Her spine went rigid. Her hands, which had been resting on Piper's shoulders, curled into fists. A man in a tailored suit stepped out of the car. He was silver-haired and sharp-featured, with the kind of face that belonged on the cover of a business magazine. He walked toward them with the confidence of someone who had never been refused anything in his life, and his eyes were fixed on Reese with a predator's focus. "Hello, sweetheart," he said, and his voice was smooth as silk and cold as ice. "Did you really think you could hide forever?" Reese stepped in front of Piper, placing herself between the child and the man. Cole was already moving, his carpenter's hands ready to do something he wasn't sure what, but something. "This is private property," he said. "You need to leave." The man looked at him for the first time, and his expression was almost amused. "You must be the handyman," he said. "The one she's been playing house with. How quaint." He turned back to Reese. "The board is getting impatient. They've been patient for 2 years. But this little vacation of yours needs to end. The company needs its CEO back." Cole felt the world tilt under his feet. CEO. Company. The words didn't make sense. Didn't fit with the woman who helped his daughter with fractions and knew how to fix a dripping faucet and always looked slightly uncomfortable when anyone tried to pay for her coffee. He looked at Reese, and for the first time since he'd known her, she looked small, afraid. She was staring at the man with an expression that broke Cole's heart, the look of someone who had fought their way to freedom only to find their cage had followed them. "I'm not coming back, Harrison," she said, and her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. "I told you. I told the board. I told everyone. I don't want that life anymore." "What you want," Harrison said, "is irrelevant. You have obligations. You have a legacy. You have a company worth $12 billion that your father built with his bare hands, and you don't get to abandon it just because you want to play house with some enough." Cole's voice was quiet, but something in it made Harrison stop mid-sentence. Cole stepped forward until he was between Reese and the man, using his body as a shield the same way he'd once protected his wife from a drunk driver who had swerved onto the sidewalk. "She said no," Cole said. "She's been saying no for 2 years. Whatever you think she owes you, whatever obligation you think she has, she's a person, not a piece of property. And right now, you're at my daughter's birthday party, scaring a bunch of 7-year-olds, So I'm going to ask you one more time to leave." Harrison looked at him, really looked, for the first time, and something flickered in his cold eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or respect. Or just the recalibration of a man who had underestimated an obstacle. "This isn't over," he said to Reese. "The quarterly meeting is in 6 weeks. If you're not there, the board will vote to remove you permanently. And then everything your father built, everything you ran away from, will be torn apart by people who don't care about anything but profit." He got back in his car and drove away, leaving behind a yard full of stunned children and a silence so thick Cole could feel it pressing against his skin. Reese was trembling. She wrapped her arms around herself, her eyes fixed on the street where the car had disappeared, and she looked more alone than anyone Cole had ever seen. "Daddy?" Piper's voice was small and confused. "Is Miss Reese okay? Why was that man mean to her?" Cole crouched down to his daughter's level, but his eyes stayed on Reese. "She's okay, sweetheart. She just needs a minute. Why don't you go inside and pick a movie? I'll be right there." Piper nodded, still looking worried, and headed for the house with a backward glance over her shoulder. Cole waited until she was gone, then walked to where Reese stood, frozen like a statue in the afternoon light. $12 billion, he said quietly. It wasn't a question. Reese flinched. "I was going to tell you," she whispered. "I kept trying to find the right time, but there was never I didn't know how to. You're a billionaire. Technically, I'm a CEO. The money is mostly tied up in the company. But yes, my father founded Callaway Industries. Aerospace and defense contracts, mostly. He died 3 years ago and left everything to me. I ran it for a year, and then—" She stopped, her voice breaking. "I couldn't do it anymore. I was working 90-hour weeks and sleeping 4 hours a night, and I had a panic attack so bad they had to call an ambulance, and I realized I was going to die in that office just like my father did. Heart attack at his desk. 62 years old, 3 ex-wives and a daughter who barely knew him. So I left. I handed day-to-day operations to Harrison, he's the COO, and I came here, and I tried to figure out who I was if I wasn't running a company." Cole was silent for a long moment. He thought about the past 2 years. All the dinners and the homework help and the Sunday mornings. The way Reese always insisted on using his ancient blender instead of buying a new one. The way she wore the same 3 outfits in rotation. The way she never talked about her work. "Why here?" he finally asked. "Of all the places you could have gone. Private islands, European villas. Why a 3-bedroom house in a town where the biggest attraction is a corn maze?" Reese looked at him, and her eyes were red-rimmed but dry. "Because no one was looking for me here," she said. "Because I found this house on a random real estate website, and it had a porch swing and a backyard. And I thought—" She laughed, but it sounded more like a sob. "I thought it looked like the kind of place where a normal person might live. Where I could wake up in the morning and not immediately think about quarterly earnings and shareholder meetings and who was trying to undermine me this week." She turned away, hugging herself tighter. "But it was selfish. Coming here, staying here, letting you and Piper get attached. I should have known Harrison would find me eventually. I should have known I couldn't actually have this." Cole felt something shift in his chest, not quite anger, but close. Something raw and urgent that had been building for 2 years. "Have what, exactly?" he asked. "A life? Friends? People who care about you?" "A lie," Reese said, still not looking at him. "This whole thing has been a lie. I'm not the woman you think I am. I'm not the nice neighbor who helps with homework. I'm someone who used to fire people before breakfast and negotiate deals worth more than this entire town. I'm someone who's been hiding from her own life because she's too weak to face it." Bull. The word came out harder than Cole intended, and Reese spun to face him, startled. "The woman I know," Cole said, stepping closer, "sat up all night with my daughter when she had nightmares about her mom. The woman I know learned how to braid hair from YouTube because Piper asked her to. The woman I know fixed my faucet and taught my kid fractions and made me feel, for the first time in 3 years, like maybe I wasn't going to have to do this alone." His voice cracked on the last word. But he didn't stop. I don't care about the money. I don't care about the company. I care that you've been lying to me for 2 years about who you are. I didn't lie about who I am, Reese said, her voice rising. I lied about what I have. Those aren't the same thing. They feel pretty similar from where I'm standing. They stared at each other, both breathing hard, the space between them charged with something that felt like electricity. Reese broke first. I'm sorry, she said, her voice crumbling. I'm so sorry. I wanted to tell you. Every day, I wanted to tell you. But you looked at me like I was just like I was normal. Like I was just a woman, not a Calloway, not a CEO, not a name on a building, just Reese. And I was so afraid that if you knew, you'd look at me differently, the way everyone else does. And how would I look at you? Cole asked quietly. Reese's laugh was bitter. Like I was above you, like I was out of your league, like you couldn't possibly. She stopped, pressing her hands to her face. Cole reached out and gently pulled her hands away. Her eyes were wet now, tears finally spilling over. I'm a carpenter, he said. I make furniture and fix houses, and I barely break even most months. I'm raising a kid alone in a town I've lived in my whole life. I've never been on a plane. I've never worn a suit that cost more than $100. And yeah, maybe I should feel like you're out of my league. But you know what? Reese shook her head, tears streaming down her face. You've been in my kitchen eating burnt toast for 2 years, Cole said. You've been reading bedtime stories to my daughter in the same sweatpants for a week straight. You've been fixing my faucets and laughing at my bad jokes and looking at me like— He stopped, his throat tight. Like I matter. And that woman, the one who does all those things, she's not out of my league. She's everything I've ever wanted. The silence stretched between them, fragile as spun glass. Reese's eyes searched his face, looking for something doubt, maybe, or pity, or the calculation she must have seen in every other face for her entire life. Whatever she found there made her breath catch. Cole, she whispered. I don't know how to do this. I've never let anyone. She couldn't finish. Cole understood. He had been there 3 years ago, standing in a hospital room with Piper in his arms and his wife's hand going cold in his. He knew what it felt like to be so broken that the idea of letting anyone close again felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. You don't have to know how, he said, echoing words he had spoken to her once before, in this same yard, in another lifetime. You just have to keep showing up. Reese looked at him for a long moment. Then she stepped forward, closed the distance between them, and buried her face in his chest. Cole wrapped his arms around her and held on. She was trembling, her whole body shaking with sobs she had probably been holding back for years. He didn't say anything. He just held her and let her fall apart, the way no one had probably ever let her fall apart before. When her sobs finally quieted, she pulled back just enough to look at him. Her face was a mess, mascara streaked, eyes swollen, nose red, and Cole thought she had never looked more beautiful. The board meeting, she said, her voice hoarse. In 6 weeks. If I don't go, they'll destroy everything my father built. But if I do go— She didn't finish, but Cole understood. If she went back, she might not come back. The machine that had almost killed her once would swallow her whole. Then we'll figure it out, Cole said. Together. Reese blinked at him. We? You didn't think I was going to let you face that alone, did you? For a moment, she just stared at him. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face, the real one, the rare one, the one that made Cole feel like he had won some cosmic lottery. You'd really do that? She asked. Walk into a boardroom full of sharks in suits for me? I've dealt with difficult clients before, Cole said. How hard can corporate sharks be? Reese laughed, a real laugh, surprised out of her, and the sound of it was like music. You have no idea, she said. But yes, okay, together. She leaned up and kissed his cheek, so quickly he almost missed it. Then she stepped back, wiping her eyes. I should go clean up. Piper's probably wondering where we are. She is, Cole agreed. She picked a movie, something with talking animals. Reese nodded, already heading toward the house, but at the door she stopped and looked back at him. Cole? Yeah? That thing you said, about the burnt toast and the bedtime stories and looking at you like you matter. She paused, her hand on the doorframe. You do. Matter. More than you know. She disappeared inside before he could respond, and Cole stood alone in the backyard, surrounded by the remnants of a birthday party and the wreckage of a secret finally exposed, and he felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. The 6 weeks before the board meeting passed in a blur. Cole finished his current projects and handed off new inquiries to a friend. Reese spent hours on the phone, rebuilding alliances and gathering information. They worked as a team, planning strategy over late-night cups of coffee, and somewhere in the middle of it all, things between them shifted. It wasn't dramatic, no declarations, no grand gestures, just small moments that added up to something bigger. Reese's hand finding his during a particularly stressful call. Cole bringing her coffee exactly the way she liked it without being asked. The way they started saying we instead of I. Piper noticed, of course. Kids always notice. She started asking when Miss Reese was going to move in for real, and whether they could get a dog now that there were 2 grown-ups to take care of it. Cole didn't have answers, but for the first time in a long time, the questions didn't scare him. The night before they were supposed to fly to New York for the board meeting, Cole couldn't sleep. He sat on the porch swing, watching the stars, and wasn't surprised when Reese appeared beside him. She was wearing the old sweatpants he had teased her about and one of his flannel shirts, and she looked exhausted and beautiful and terrified. I keep thinking about all the ways this could go wrong, she said, settling onto the swing beside him. Harrison has been positioning himself for a takeover for years. The board is tired of my absence. I might walk in there tomorrow and lose everything. Would that be the worst thing? Cole asked. Reese looked at him sharply. I mean it, he said. You left because that life was killing you. If they take the company, you're free. Really free. You could stay here, build a new life, be the person you've been pretending to be for the last 2 years, except for real. Reese was quiet for a long moment. The swing creaked gently beneath them. It's not that simple, she finally said. The company employs 40,000 people. If Harrison takes over, he'll gut it for short-term profits. People will lose their jobs. Communities that depend on our factories will suffer. My father, her voice caught. My father wasn't a good man in a lot of ways, but he cared about the people who worked for him. He used to know all their names. Every Christmas, he would personally visit every factory and shake every hand. That legacy, that's what I'd be abandoning. Cole reached over and took her hand. Her fingers were cold, and he rubbed warmth into them slowly. Then we don't let them take it, he said. We walk in there tomorrow, and we fight. And whatever happens, we do it together. Reese turned to look at him, her eyes searching his face in the dim light. Why? She asked. Why are you doing this? You could have walked away when Harrison showed up. You could have decided this was all too complicated, too messy, too far outside your normal life. Why are you still here? Cole thought about the question. He thought about the past 2 years, and the past 6 weeks, and the woman sitting beside him who was both more and less than he had imagined. Because you showed up, he said simply. When Piper was sick and I was drowning, you showed up with soup and you never really left. Because you learned to braid hair from YouTube. Because you look at my daughter like she's the most important thing in the world. Because... He stopped, his throat tight. Because I love you, he said. I've loved you for a long time, and I was too scared to say it because I thought you'd leave. But you're leaving anyway, at least for a while, so I might as well tell you the truth. The silence that followed was so complete that Cole could hear his own heartbeat. He had laid himself bare, and now he waited, exposed and vulnerable, for whatever came next. Reese's answer wasn't words. She leaned over and kissed him, really kissed him. Not a quick peck on the cheek, but something deep and desperate and long overdue. When she finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. I love you too, she said. I've loved you since the day you told me I didn't have to know how to do this. I just had to keep showing up." She laughed, and there were tears on her cheeks again, but this time they looked like relief. "I'm not good at this, you know. Relationships, feelings, normal human interaction. Neither am I," Cole said. "I once tried to ask my wife out by leaving a note on her car, and it blew away before she saw it." Reese laughed again, and the sound of it was everything. "We're a mess," she said. "We're a mess," he agreed. The board meeting was everything Reese had warned him about, and worse. Cole had never been in a room with so many expensive suits and cold eyes. Harrison spoke first, his voice dripping with false concern as he outlined all the reasons why Reese was unfit to lead. Cole watched from the back of the room, his fists clenched, as man after man echoed Harrison's points. Reese sat at the head of the table, perfectly still, her face unreadable, and when it was her turn to speak, she stood up and said, "You're right. I did abandon this company. I did run away when things got hard, and I've spent the last 2 years trying to figure out who I am when I'm not behind this desk." The room was silent. Harrison looked smug. "But here's what I learned," Reese continued, and her voice grew stronger. "I learned that leadership isn't about working 90 hours a week. It's about knowing when to step back so you can see the bigger picture. I learned that the best decisions come from a place of clarity, not exhaustion. And I learned," she looked at Cole, and something softened in her face. "I learned that the things that matter most aren't things at all. They're people, they're connections. They're showing up for someone when it's hard, and staying when it would be easier to leave." She turned back to the board. "I'm not asking you to trust me because of my name. I'm asking you to trust the work I've done in the past 6 weeks. The alliances I've rebuilt, the strategic plan I've developed, the commitment I'm making to this company and everyone who depends on it. Vote for Harrison if you want, but know that what you'll get is short-term profit and long-term destruction. Or vote for me, and get someone who finally understands what this company can be." The vote was closer than Cole would have liked, but when the final count came in, Reese had won. Harrison stormed out without a word, and Cole watched as board members who had seemed hostile an hour ago lined up to shake Reese's hand. She handled them gracefully, but he could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the relief she was barely containing. When the room finally emptied, he went to her. She collapsed into his arms like a puppet with cut strings. "We did it," she murmured into his chest. "We did it." "You did it," Cole corrected. "I just stood in the back and tried not to look out of place." Reese laughed, pulling back to look at him. "You were there. That's all that mattered." She took a deep breath. "I have to stay here for a while. Months, probably. There's so much work to do, so much damage to repair. But," she hesitated. "Come with me," Cole blinked. "What?" "Move here. You and Piper. I'll find you a workshop, a school for her. Whatever you need. I know it's crazy and fast, and you have a whole life back home, but—" "Yes," Cole said, cutting her off. Reese stared at him. "Yes? Just like that?" "You kept showing up for us," Cole said. "Now it's my turn." The smile that spread across her face was worth every terrifying moment of the past 6 weeks. "Piper's going to want that dog," she said. "Piper's going to get that dog," Cole agreed, and then he kissed her, right there in the boardroom of a $12 billion company, surrounded by leather chairs and mahogany tables, and the ghost of a man who had built an empire but never learned that the things that matter most aren't things at all. 3 months later, Cole stood on the balcony of their new apartment, watching the sun set over Manhattan. Inside, he could hear Piper giggling as their new golden retriever puppy named Toast, because Piper had inherited her father's sense of humor, chased her around the living room. Reese was on a call in her office, but he could see her through the glass door, gesturing animatedly as she talked through some new initiative she was passionate about. The transition hadn't been easy. There were moments when Cole felt like a fish out of water, surrounded by a world he didn't understand. There were moments when Reese disappeared into her work, and Cole had to remind her to eat, to sleep, to come back to them. There were arguments and adjustments, and the messy, difficult work of building a life together. But there were also Sunday mornings in bed, watching cartoons with Piper wedged between them. There were date nights at restaurants Cole couldn't pronounce, and hot dog stands on street corners. There were quiet moments on this balcony, watching the city lights come alive, feeling like maybe, just maybe, he had found his way home. Reese's call ended, and a moment later, she joined him on the balcony. She was still in her work clothes, her hair escaping from its careful twist, and she looked tired, but happy. "Long day?" he asked. "The longest," she admitted, leaning into him. "But good. We're launching a new program, scholarships for kids from factory communities. My father would have hated it." She smiled. "Which is how I know it's right." Cole wrapped an arm around her, and they stood in comfortable silence, watching the city below. "You know," Reese said after a while, "I never thanked you properly." "For what?" "For that joke. The one about marrying you." Cole laughed. "I believe your exact response was, 'I thought you'd never ask.' Which, by the way, gave me a heart attack." "I meant it," Reese said softly. She turned to face him, her expression serious. "I had been waiting for you to ask, not because I expected it, but because I wanted it so badly I couldn't breathe. Every time you looked at me, every time you touched my hand or laughed at something, I said, 'I thought, maybe this time.' And when you finally said it, even as a joke, I couldn't pretend anymore." Cole cupped her face in his hands. "It was never a joke," he said. "I think I knew that even when I was saying it. I think I've known for a long time." Reese's eyes glistened. "So," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "are you going to ask me again? Properly this time?" Cole's heart stuttered. He hadn't planned this, hadn't bought a ring, hadn't prepared a speech. But standing here, with Piper's laughter floating through the door and the woman he loved looking at him like he was the only thing in the world that mattered, he realized he didn't need any of that. He dropped to one knee. "Reese Calloway," he said, his voice steady despite the earthquake in his chest. "I don't have a fancy ring or a $12 billion company. I can't offer you anything except my heart, my daughter, and a really terrible sense of humor. But if you'll have me I promise to keep showing up, every day, for the rest of my life." Reese was crying now, tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling too, that rare, brilliant smile that had made him fall in love with her 2 years ago on a Tuesday afternoon. "Yes," she said, 1,000 times yes." Cole stood and pulled her into his arms, and she kissed him with everything she had. All the fear and hope and love she had been carrying for 2 years, finally set free. Through the glass door, Piper's voice rang out, "Daddy, Toast ate my shoe." They broke apart, laughing, and Reese wiped her eyes. "Welcome to the family," Cole said. "Chaos included." "I wouldn't have it any other way," Reese replied. And as they walked inside together, toward their daughter and their ridiculous puppy and the beautiful, messy, ordinary life they had built against all odds, Cole realized that the best love stories don't end with a fairy tale. They end with burnt toast and eaten shoes and 2 imperfect people choosing each other, over and over again, for all the ordinary days to come. The end